kind of started. And I'm going to show you one more thing. Now this is, again, this floor is pharmacy too, and it goes way back that way. There's offices, our student affairs group, all that. But we have a turn-of-the-century pharmacy museum. Like I say, we've been around for 110 years. And so when alumni accumulate artifacts from pharmacy, and they send them to us. And so this is, what I'm going to show you is a museum that's built on something that would look like about 105 or so years ago, in the early 1920s in the United States. This is what a pharmacy would look like, and we'll walk through different pieces. One thing I'll point out as we're walking by, this is our student awards cabinet. They get to put, we have about 13 professional organizations for this school. They're professional pharmacy organizations. Some of them are fraternities or sororities that are pharmacy specific. Some of them are honor societies and things like that. And they get national awards. They put them in there. This is a good area for pictures.
Wow. It's a museum.
Okay, so I'll walk you through from this side. Starting over here. So I'm sorry, we're doing a little. Some of our history students from the university are actually doing projects here in the history of medicines. So this is the area that's representing the area of medicine called patent medicines. This was before the US FDA regulated anything. So people could make wild claims of what would happen. And you might have heard the term snake oil before. Mm-hmm. So people used to sell what they called snake oil. It wasn't really snake oil, but they claimed all these wild things that it would cure. Yeah. And so if you picked any one of those bottles, I have one in my hand, they would make these wild claims. So this one was called Dixie Mothers. And it says it's a good remedy for White's inflammation, falling of the wound, and all diseases peculiar to women. Figure that out. It says it has unicorn root in it and blue ganache, whatever that is. But the active ingredient was 20% alcohol. So a lot of these were alcohol and caffeine and things like that. They really weren't useful, but there was no regulation of them at the time. So it wasn't until the 1920s or the 1930s or so that the FDA started regulating medicines be safe, and then a little bit later that they'd be effective. And once that happened, all these things went off the market because they had no data to show their safety or effectiveness.
Sedatives.
And for every one of these, we have a whole drawer full of other things. They're kind of labeled by different pills. So that was the other interesting era. That era was these, and these were sold not necessarily in pharmacies, but by traveling salesmen. And so they would engage the public, and they would use these trading cards. Kind of in the U.S., we have like baseball trading cards, but this is medicine trading cards. And so this is a good example of this. Indian, it says, this is an advertisement for Dr. Morse's Indian root pills. And you see, the Native American Indian doesn't look too happy there. He looks pretty sick. Well, he takes Dr. Morse's pills, and all of a sudden, look, it's a miracle.
Advertising.
Yeah. So people traded these cards. The salesman would hand these out, and people would trade them. And so it became kind of like a self-advertisement for them. And there was many of these. We have a big collection of that. Mm-hmm. So this next section, you see a lot of botanicals here. So back in the turn of the century, there weren't big chemical companies. You could buy a lot of things. And so you had to make them from plants.
Are you guys going to the facility?
A lot of these are written in Latin, and you can kind of figure out maybe some of the names.
No.
I don't know Latin very well.
Are you guys already set? Because it's the next. You guys going to go ahead and get everything started there? Yes,
yeah. Clear came from the United States.
We are about to finish and then meeting you guys at the facility.
Valuable because they're hand stenciled there.
So you guys, after this, we are going straight facility. So we should have the first team go to the facility. Let white.
These you might kind of walk through the community here. This log over here was a log of when the United States decided there might be some addictive substances. They need to kind of start to look at dispensing of them. So this was in the early 1900s. And if you look at the log there, they were dispensing heroin and opium and cocaine, etc. Mm-hmm. So, look at the main part of that log there, the middle column. You'll see the name of what they were dispensing at the time.
Cocaine, opium.
So
67 grams.
How did you guys able to archive all this?
yeah. These are all donated things from our alumni. Every country had a dispensary, and they had kind of common recipes for things. In Europe, that were all written in Latin. In the United States, when they first doing them, they wrote English on one side, Latin on the other side. So that's for like scorbic or something, citric acid. Yeah, and so you'll see them both written. This is the oldest dispensary we have in the museum. It's from London. It's from 1801. Okay, so there was an era of medicine when they thought that all diseases were caused by humors that were floating around in your bloodstream. And so in order to cure people of these diseases, all they had to do is bloodlet them, right? So they had different ways of doing that. So this was again, 1920s cupping device where you made a wound essentially by pulling a vacuum on the cup. And screwing this together, pull a vacuum, not like the athletes do now. This was a hard wound that's going to bleed. Now, if you didn't want to do that, if you wanted something a little faster, I'm not going to do this because I'll probably cut myself, but this thing, you triggered it, and it actually, a bunch of lancets would come out of there and make the cut for you. And if you're a little squeamish and want to do that part, they had these things called blister beetles, and you would grind them up and grind the parts on and they would cause a reaction on the leg that would make you bleed, wherever they're putting them. And then there's this guy. Anyone know what that is?
The leech.
The leech. And we still use those. My wife's a pharmacist over at the hospital. She works in a surgical intensive care. So when they have certain things where, let's say you have a cut on your finger and they mend the cut, it's a pretty severe one, but it's bleeding underneath still and it's making it swell up. And so they actually put a leech on it and let the blood, suck the blood out so the surface can heal. And so we still use them in medicine. So that's the bloodletting part here. Now we'll talk about how they got from there to something that someone could ingest. But one of the things they needed to do is take some of those medicines and grind them up, right? So we have mortar and pestles here. And you'll notice some of them are made out of stone, some of them are made out of wood, some of them are made out of brass. And they kind of selected it based on how fine they needed to grind something and what the things they were grinding up. A lot of these, we don't know exactly how old they are. They look pretty old. The one that we know for certainty is this one that came from Amsterdam in like the early 1600s. It is very heavy it's brass.
Okay.
So if you walked into a turn-of-the-century pharmacy, and this is, again, 1920s or so, you would find some, counters, things people could buy. You would see a big table, and behind that was this. So this was the pharmacist's bench. This is where they made things. And so the prescriptions were pretty complicated back in the day because, as you'll see, it's hard to make these prescriptions. So they made pills in those days. So here's a trivia question. How many pills are on the market today?
Trillion. How many? Just one.
How many pills are on the market today?
Trillions.
This is a trick question, I'll say.
For one pill?
Yeah, there's none, because by definition, a pill is something that's hand-rolled. If you ever think of people that have Parkinson's disease, they say they have pill-rolling motion. That's because that's how pharmacists rolled pills back in the day. Everything we have now are tablets, right? And they're made out of your high-pressure, your high-action machines that can make thousands and thousands in a minute, right? So these are just fake ones. But how did they do that? That's the question. So it took a long time for them to make things. So typically the prescriptions were very complicated. Like if someone needed 4 medicines, they would put them all in the same prescription. And they would say, okay, we need 10 doses of something, okay? And so they would weigh out enough of the medicine for 10 doses. They would put it in a mortar and pestle. They would put something in it to make it kind of pasty, like acacia or something like that. And then they would roll it into like a log, like a Play-Doh log, if you know what Play-Doh is. And they would put it on a pill tile. So they roll the log over 10 segments on the pill tile, cut it up into 10s, and they would take each one of those and roll it into a pill. So it took quite a while to make a prescription back in those days. But some of the things that maybe weren't too toxic or whatever, they could actually make them this way and put the paste across this and run this, and it would kind of make it into a little bit pills. They had things that they wanted to sugarcoat them. They could put some sugar in here and shake it up and do that. There's all kinds of art. I'm not one of the curators. We have faculty that are curators for the museum. I can only speak to the superficial parts. Some of them they could sit here for 4 hours and talk to you about stories and things. But they had things that were bitter, that wouldn't taste very good. And so they had these little rice papers. And so they could put the powder in the rice paper, seal it with water, put another one on top, and then give it with a spoonful of water, it would go down. Now sometimes people, they were expecting medicines to taste bad. And so if they didn't taste bad, they were like, oh, there's nothing in it, right? And so back where you see that black jar that's sitting there on the first shelf, right behind it is something that's rolled up. It looks like vines. That's sarsaparilla. Sometimes they would put sarsaparilla in it to make it taste bitter. So just to show people, hey, yes, it is really has medicine in it.